Hello everyone, we have the augment guide for patch 13.9. This is going to be for the early game, so at stage 2.1, these are the augments that I think you should be taking. As always, I'll make a new video for this every single patch, and keep in mind, like, they are separated into tiers. However, you always have to tailor the augment to your board, and that's what all these notes are for. So let's start with the silver augments. We're going to go into the gold augments, Prismatic Augments, and then every single champion augment as well. But let's just get right into this. So for the silver augments, it's pretty balanced. Whenever there's a tier of augments with no S tier augments, it generally means that most things are pretty equal power. So the exception to this, because we only have a couple of A's but we have a lot of B tiers, is going to be the Infiniteam Heart. Infiniteam is one of those traits that just likes the +1 to the synergy and doesn't really care too much about having the actual item or emblem. So that's why their heart is much better than their crowns and their crests. But I generally only recommend taking this if you have at least 4 or more Infiniteam units on your bench. So that could be 2 Lucians and 2 Pantheons, or like 1 Lucian, 1 Pantheon, 2 Sivers, any combination of that or more. Next up we have Exiles. So Exiles is going to be just good for win streaking and flexing. Band of Thieves, same thing. Second Wind, same thing, except for Second Wind you want to rely more on tanks. So if you have a strong tank line, Second Wind's going to be really powerful because you need the tank to live in order for the effect to trigger. Item Grab Bag, same thing. But let's take a look at the ones that we skipped over. So Duelist Heart. Duelist, very good comp right now. Whenever a comp is just good, I believe we have it in the S tier right now on the meta snapshot. And that's also on this website, BunnyMuffins.lol/augments to get to here. But the tier list can also just be reached at this link over here, BunnyMuffins.lol/meta. But let's go back into the augments. But moving back down to where we were, so Duelist and Anima Squad, pretty good. So Duelist Heart, I'd only really take if you have a Locket or 4 Duelists on 2-1. With Anima Squad, you want 4 more copies of Anima units. So it might be like C tier with 3 copies, B tier with 4 copies, and then A tier with 5, and then S tier with 6 or more copies of Anima Squad units. You could kind of look at it like that. Makeshift Armor, it's really good if you have all offensive items on your bench. Preparation, you could kind of flex around this. Future Sight, Cybernetic Uplink. Future Sight, kind of same thing. Cybernetic Uplink, only do this if you're going for ability power comps. Spellslingers, for example, I guess if you're going Spellslingers, you could go for Cybernetic Uplink too. Anima Squad, Spellslingers, Star Guardians, like those comps are going to make great use of this. But Spellslingers, you want 4 copies. Thrill the Hunt, only do this if you have a bunch of 2 stars. This augment is useless in the early game if you don't have any units upgraded. So this is like A tier or even S tier if you have a bunch of upgrades, but it's also like F tier if you don't, so keep that in mind. Luden's Echo, only build this with blue buff. Sure Shot Heart, Sure Shots are pretty decent, so if you have at least 1 Last Whisper component, either a bow or a glove, this is going to be perfectly fine. Mascots are kind of back, not really, but if you start the game out with a Vex from an orb, or if you have like a 2-star mascot, or like just a ton of mascots, then sure, go for this. Tiny Titans, good with Econ. AFK, good with Econ's consistency, same thing. Electrocharge, only take this with a 2-star tank, so this is kind of similar to Second Wind, but it's a bit more damagey rather than like Healy. Celestial Blessing, you pretty much treat this like AFK or consistency, but it does give you like a little bit of a combat boost. Not much, but like Celestial Blessing, really good for late game. Pandora's Items, only take this with comps that are very item reliant. So if we go back to the tier list, I might show like item/augment dependency over here. Sometimes it might be more related to the augment than the item, but if something has a very high reliance on items, such as like either I say it out loud or write it down somewhere in the meta snapshot, then Pandora's is going to be really good. Cybernetic Shell, only if you have like unbuildable items. Oxforce Heart, if you have a good opener for the Spellslinger build, you could go for this, though it's not like that great. Renegade Heart, Renegades are back. Featherweights, only do this if you can either use it to win streak or if you're going for 1 or 2 cost reroll. And then in the C tier, these are generally going to be very situational. Only go for them if you have like very, very perfect setups, because they're just not as powerful right now, and there's not too much you could kind of do about that, you know? And then the NAs down here, this just means that these augments are not offered at stage 2.1, so you can't select them. I guess Hacker Heart is just the worst one of the patch, so just keep that in mind. Onto gold augments. Star Guardian Crest, Prankster Crest, Mascot, like a lot of the crests are pretty high up. Infiniteam, things like that are going to be pretty decent right now. Again, there are no S tier augments in the gold tier right now, which means that gold is pretty decently balanced. So if you ever get like a silver or gold game at the start, you probably shouldn't complain that much, no matter if your options are all like completely bad, because no one's getting something like super duper duper insane unless they have like an insane board combined with a very good augment. But like, hey, sometimes that happens in life. The Star Guardian comp got nerfed a little bit, but Star Guardian crest was like so good before that even though it got nerfed, it's still gonna be very, very nice, especially with this augment. So just make sure you have like some sort of opener for items to play around Misfortune and some of the other Star Guardian champions. Prankster crest, you always take this, just go for Anima Squad, or you could do the Gnar build. The Gnar build's pretty nice right now. Mascot crest, same rules as mascot heart, except this one's a little bit better. Remember how I said that Infiniteam crest, the heart's a little bit better relative to the other augments it faces? Well, mascot crest is the opposite because the mascot effect is very, very powerful. Portable Forge, this one's pretty decent just to flex around. Zonia's, Blitzhook, Manazane, these are gonna be my go-tos, and then the rest are still nice, but definitely not as powerful. But like this augment is just overall very solid, so pretty much always take this if there isn't something like super insane for your team. It doesn't mean it has to be like one of the stuff that's higher than this on the tier list. By the way, I think this is actually like semi-alphabetical order or something like that. Like pretty much if they're A tier, they're all like relatively similar power. But let's say you have like Anima Squad crest with like 7 Anima units, like yeah, that's going to be better than Portable Forge. But like in most cases, if you see Portable Forge, you pretty much just take it. Infiniteam crest only with 5+ Infiniteam. Oxforce crest only if you're forcing Twisted Fate comp. Salvage bin, this one is very powerful if you want to win streak early on because you're allowed to slam all your items, and then you just start the game with a lot of power, and it doesn't hurt you later on because you get to remake all your items to get perfect items later in the game. So this is both good in the early game and the late game. It's actually good at all stages in the game. The one tricky part about this, the weakness of Salvage bin, is that it's difficult to use. So if you want to like show off your skills or whatever, let's say you're trying to impress someone or something like that with your TFT skills, Salvage bin is the way to go. Exiles, this is same as before, just pretty solid overall. Anima Squad crest, 4+ Anima preparation, same thing as before. Scope weapons, only do this if you're forcing brawlers. So if you have a bunch of 2-star brawlers and you have a lot of good Jax items that are not bow reliant, for example, let's say you have a Jeweled Gauntlet or like a Hextech Gunblade, or like a Quicksilver, like all the items that Jax uses that don't involve bows, scope weapons is going to be really nice because now if you do get a bow, you just build a Rage Blade and call it a day. Cybernetic uplink, pretty good. Second Wind, same thing as before, pretty good. Ancient Archives, I like this one a lot actually, but it's a little bit harder to use. Not as difficult as Salvage bin, but what you want to do with Ancient Archives is you want to kind of semi-tailor your Toma traits. And to do that, you just wait 1 round before popping it. So sometimes you could just pop it right away if you want to YOLO it, but it's always best to wait for those things. Spellslinger crest, if you have 3 or more Spellslinger units, it's pretty solid. Phony frontline, if you want a win streak, it's very, very powerful. Or if you have like a Locket start, very powerful too. Cluttered Mind, great for econ. Jeweled Lotus, like pretty decent. Built different, very good. Metabolic Accelerator, use this for econing. Same with Three's Company. Underground Heart, if you want to like YOLO it, sure. Hustler, this one's very powerful if you have at least 1 upgrade because you get a huge level advantage on everyone else, and you get access to higher cost units if you level up aggressively with Hustler. Sunfire Board, sure. Makeshift Armor, only do this with offensive items as we talked about before. Battle Mage, it's whatever. Clear Mind, definitely like that one, great for econing. And then Riftwalker Crest, I guess we're forcing Riftwalker. It's a decent build, but I just don't care too much about this. I don't think it gives you that much more power compared to other stuff. It's only good because Riftwalker is kind of good right now, but the crest really doesn't do that much. Trade Sector, it's good for like delayed win streaks. So if you have like a lot of pairs but no upgrades, you could look into taking Trade Sector, or if you're going for a reroll comp. True Twos is incredibly powerful if you have good items but no upgrades. Calculated Loss, good if you have an econ opener with no upgrades. Sure Shot, same rule as before. Celestial Blessing, same thing as before. So you may have noticed like some of them, they have like kind of the repeat of the old augments that we went over in silver already. So generally like the same rules apply, but if some of them is drastically different, like sometimes I know it isn't the case right now, but sometimes Exiles, for example, like Exiles 1 is really, really good, but then Exiles 2 is kind of bad. Sometimes it's like that, and I'll try to point it out. But for the most part, most of the augments are kind of the same relative power, despite being in different tiers. Featherweight's slightly better in gold than it is in silver. Cybernetic implants, this one, like not that great. The C tiers, like try not to play these. They're just much better options. But I will make some exceptions for Triforce, Rich Get Richer, and Thrill the Hunt. So Triforce, if you have a lot of 3-cost units in the early game, let's say like a Rammus and like a Sona dropped or something like that, and you're like, oh, maybe I could like have a good item for Sona, or like you have a good tank item for Rammus. And then if you're playing at least 2 3-cost units, Triforce is something to kind of look into. By the way, it doesn't have to be those champions I mentioned, I just use them as an example. Rich Get Richer, really good with econ opener, so if you have like no upgrades and you got like 2 item components or even 1 item component, and then you have like 20 gold at the start of the game, you can make it like 30 gold with Rich Get Richer. Like I think I had that once when I only got 1 item component. I started the game with insane amounts of money, and then by the time I lost streak the entirety of stage 2, and then I stabilized on stage 3-2, I was just like super powerful because I had like 1 billion gold. I don't remember how much, but it was definitely a lot. Knife's Edge and Ascension, they could be used for win streaking. Thrill the Hunt, great if you have 2-star, same as before. Like again, this augment is gonna be like C tier or even like F tier if you don't have upgrades, but it's gonna be like A or S tier if you do, because the healing in the early game is just very powerful. Defender Crest, only take this if there are a lot of attack damage opponents. Combat training, if you get like a Draven or Gnar and you want to farm them early on and you're just forcing the comp, that's kind of takeable. Luden's Echo, you need blue buff. Electro Charge, only with 2-star tanks. First aid kit, unless I'm starting the game with like 2 Sonas and I'm playing 2 Sonas for healing, like I probably wouldn't take this. And then the rest, like, yeah, generally like pretty bad. There are times for them. I'm not saying never take these, but yeah, they're generally a lot weaker. The Fs, I would say like never take. But the C tiers, maybe there is some time and place for them. Next up we have are the Prismatic Augments. So this is where things get a little more interesting. So Prankster Crown in the S tier, very powerful with the Gnar comp. And in the Gnar comp, they removed the Prankster bug where Prankster got rid of the Gadgettine buff. So this works very well with that. And you also have a second option in going Anima Squad with the Prankster build. Or you could even go for the Star Guardian comp because they run Echo. So Prankster just like overall pretty solid. Lots of good comps you could flex into. Built Different 3 is much better than Built Different 2, so that is one distinction I'll make. And I typically would go this if I have at least 1 2-star and if I have a Last Whisper component, because you typically carry Samira. Mascot's going to be pretty decent for the same rules as before. Infiniteam Crown, same thing. Ancient Archives 2, this is very powerful, but you really have to tailor your Toma traits. For the gold Ancient Archives, the one somewhere up here, I forget where it was, you could just pop it right away, but for Ancient Archives 2, definitely wait to pop. Duelist Crown, good because Duelist is good. Electro Charge 3, very powerful for win streaking in the early game. Cruel Pack, definitely take this. This one is going to be a little weird. I'll try to get a Cruel Pack game. I have to like wait to get it into a game on like the current patch to like kind of show it, but this might be one of the more fun augments in the game. Spellslinger Crown, if you have a tier or something, or if you have 4 or more Spellslinger units, go ahead and try this. Star Guardian Crown, kind of the same rules. Ace in the Hole, I thought they actually removed this, but I checked the data, and some games have this still at stage 2-1. Anima Squad Crown, still good, but not as good as the other Anima Squad augments because the crown only gives you an item component, not a full item, so relative power is a little worse. Radiant Relic, so this one they changed the items a little bit. However, I still think the same ones are as good as before. Locket might be the best item, but Zeke's still good, Glove's still good, Shiv's still good, ZZ Rot's still good. Pretty much all the things I list here are still nice, and if there is like a meta item, even if like the stats say that the item kind of sucks in the Radiant version relative to other Radiant items, you still should build it if that's truly the team you're playing around. Woodland Charm, this is probably one of the best win streaking augments. Sometimes you just get really good 2-star upgrades, and especially around like stage 3, it gets really powerful too if you get like a good game. This is kind of like a go big or go home augment. Like if you just have a 2-star 1-cost upgraded, maybe this isn't as good as win streaking as like a Cruel Pact or something, or like Built Different. But if you have something like a 2-star 2-cost or something ridiculous, this could get really out of control. So that's kind of fun there. Living Forge, I actually love this augment also because you just get so many items. So make sure to play a team comp that uses multiple carries. So comps that have like a secondary carry, Living Forge is going to be a lot better. Underground Soul, sure. Golden Ticket, very good for reroll. This is like one of the best times to take Golden Ticket. A lot of people, they take Golden Ticket on like stage 3-2 or 4-2. And while it's not horrible in those stages, it's really, really good in the early game. And then the sweet spot is 2-cost reroll, but 3 or 1 cost is also fine. March of Progress, pretty decent. Cursed Crown, good for win streaking. Windfall, if you have no upgrades and you want to econ, definitely go for that. Oxforce Crown, only do this with a static shiv component. Preparation, same thing as before. Hard Crown, if you have tiers, go for it. Level up, it's okay. Brawler Crown if you're forcing brawlers. Lucky Gloves, this one's pretty good, but I like making this if I have at least one other glove, just so I can get 2 Lucky Gloves in the early game. Binary Airdrop, probably not. It's kind of difficult to use. Luden's Echo only with the blue buff. Future Sight, this one's a little sketchy to take, but it's not horrible, you know. All the C tiers, I'd say the ones that are pretty takeable or like less situational, because obviously if you have like great sure shot items or something like that, you get a Sivir 2, then like yeah, sure shot's gonna be great. So you all already know how to go for those. But for some of the flexible ones, I think Birthday Present, it's good if you have like a decent amount of gold to be able to afford to level up a bit, and econ to reach the next intervals. Item Grab Bag, good if you want to win streak with. Band of Thieves, same thing for win streaking and good for comps that have a lot of different carries. And then the last one I want to point out might be Knife's Edge 2. If you're able to get some sort of duelist early game going, like this could be pretty decent because you do play a lot of units in the front line. Not the best like late game augment, but in the early game, it kind of gives you a decent power spike, even though it's not that much. And then like F tiers, like just don't take these. They're just not that great. Oh yeah, another thing, Laser Core Crown and Soul and Gadgetine Crown and Soul all got like moved to stage 4. So you can't get those anymore. So some of these were like S tier before and they kind of removed that. But let's move into the hero augments. So in these, they're overall pretty balanced too. Like I don't think there are any S tiers in the 1-cost units, neither in the 2-cost, and we do have some in the 3-cost. But 3-cost is super rare that pretty much doesn't really happen that often. Like I bet only like maybe a couple percentage of you all might get a 3-cost game on this patch. But for the hero augments, I have this like note up here. So for the carry augments, make sure if you go for them, like let's say you want to play for laser focus. This one's a great Ashe carry augment and probably one of the best 1-cost reroll augments right now. So make sure you could get at least 3 copies of them, including the unit you get from the orb. If you can't at least get that, like preferably I have even more than that. Preferably I have a 2-star Ashe and then I still have the orb, so I have 4 copies of Ashe. I only need 5 more to get 3-star Ashe. That would be the ideal scenario. But if not, it's best to take a support augment and kind of flex the comp or play for like a win streak. So Nasus's Soul Eater, for example, this is a support augment for Nasus. It's great if you get an Anima Squad opener and then you could just level up very aggressively. Well, not very aggressively, but just level up like decently aggressively and use that to kind of win streak in the early game. Blitzcrank Rocket Grab, great support augment as well. Just like play this with tempo. And that's all you really have to do. But yeah, as for the A tier, we have Ashe carry augment, Lucian support, Lucian carry augment, but this one's actually kind of like a support augment because it gives you experience points. Soul Eater is Nasus's support one. The Pantheon's pretty decent. Lulu Growth Spurt, pretty decent. Like I guess both Pantheon ones are good right now. And then the Blitzcrank Rocket Grab. These are kind of like the ones that are slightly better than the rest, but it's always going to be situational compared to your board. Another thing to note about 1-cost augments, you may have noticed there are a decent amount of A tiers, very few B tiers, but a lot of C tiers. So if you ever get like a 1-1-1, definitely reroll a lot in order to get like some of the B or higher ones. That's not to say that the C tiers are never takeable. For example, Bigger Better Buckler, this is a very powerful augment. But unless you could get like Poppy 2 guaranteed and have good items for your Poppy, it's pretty bad. For like Renekton Reign of Anger, for some of these I'm like, if you have like 5 Renektons, like go ahead, take it, you know, because you get the 3-star for free. So there's always some give or take whenever you like look at these. You always have to tailor the comps to your board. But if you have like a 1-1-1 or a 1-1-2, definitely try to reroll a little more aggressively. Onto the 2-cost hero augments, we have in like the best ones, Yasuo Wind of the Wanderer, this one's probably is the best one, just because Yasuo reroll is just so powerful right now. I'd pretty much take this even if like the start you have for it isn't the best, because it's probably still like C+ tier at worst. If you have like no duelist items, no duelist units, and no Yasuo items, it might still be C+ tier. So if you have like any of those conditions, it moves up to B tier. And then if you have like 2 or 3 or 4 of those conditions, moves up to like A tier or even like S tier. Sivir time and a half, just because Infiniteams or Sure Shots are pretty good right now. Any Burning Spirit, this one is just going into the AP comps. Mana Tempering also is pretty solid. Small Game Hunter, just very good in the early game for win streaking. This one's obviously better early game than it is in the late game. So even if the average of Small Game Hunter might be like pretty average, if you're able to take it in the early game, it gets much, much more powerful. Rel Hold the Line and Channel Pheromancy. I think Rel Hold the Line got nerfed a bit, but it's still pretty decent for the Star Guardian comps. Anma Squad with the Jinxes. Yasuo Spirit of the Exile is still playable. Vi Boxing Lesson, great for flexing. Guardian Spirit Malphite. This one's pretty decent, but you're pretty much going for like either a super comp or like a Vex build. Vitality of the Ox, this one's pretty solid, especially in like any duelist comp right now. Hextech Retribution, pretty solid. Your Cut. This one got changed a little bit, I believe, in the recent patch, so it's a little bit better now than it was before. Raider Spoil, I think this one's still fine. It depends on how good Kai'Sa is, and right now Kai'Sa did get nerfed, so maybe that's feeling the effects from that. But I think as people stop playing Kai'Sa because they realize it's not as powerful as it was before, this one could be a little bit better later on. And then like the rest, you kind of only want to take if you like have a lot of copies of those units, except for Cleansing Safeguard. This one's still pretty bad right now. But let's move on into the 3-cost hero augments. Again, these are really rare, so where you don't need to spend too much time on this, and you could always check this out on the website, BunnyMuffins.lol/augments, or just go to anywhere on the website, hover over the tier list, and then click the augment section over here. But let's move all the way back down. Remember how I said the Pike augment, which one was it? Small Game Hunter, much better in the early game than it is in the late game? The same thing goes for Fear is Freedom, because this Morgana augment in the early game, I've never actually gotten it, but like if you just think about it, it's very, very, very powerful because you get one additional target on your Morgana and she already stuns 2 people. With this augment, she stuns 3 people. So if you're in the early game, you're facing someone with 4 champions, you stun 75% of their team. That's absolutely nuts, and no other champion can do that on a consistent basis. I guess Rammus could do it if they have a lot of melees, but again, it's not a consistent basis. This is more so good just because Rammus is strong early, and if you have any sort of items for him, it's going to be really, really good. Power Grid, pretty decent if you have Blue Buff or Shojin. Time Knife, good if you have Shen items for Time Knife. Behemoth is just pretty decent because he just gets 450 bonus health. It's like not the best thing, but it's not like the worst either. Into the Night, pretty solid. Triumphant Return, decent. Reverberation, okay. Kai'Sa Multi-Shot, this one definitely took a step down because of all the Kai'Sa nerfs. Spread Shot, really good if you have at least 1 sword item. Mirror Image, great for flexing. I actually love Mirror Image. I think it's like one of my favorite augments because it's pretty much the same thing as Woodland Charm, except you have to run LeBlanc. Grandmaster Training, if you're running some mech comp, it's pretty decent. It's good in the Sure Shot comp, though it does work a little bit oddly. Vex, if you're going Vex, obviously. But yeah, for pretty much all these, like if you're going the champion, if you're picking one of these augments, you pretty much have to force one of the champions or like some comp that they're involved in. So if it's a carry augment, such as the Vayne one, where's the Vayne one? Spread Shot, like yeah, you just have to force either Duelist or Anma Squad Vayne. But if you get a support one, it's kind of like a little more flexible. And if you get a tank one, the only exception is going to be Time Knife. But for all the other tank augments, like the Rammus ones, the Alistair ones, Riven ones, you could kind of flex into a bunch of different comps just because they fit in a lot of different teams. But hopefully this will help you all in deciding what augments to pick on stage 2-1. Again, it's really, really important to make the right picks because if you play a good early game, the rest of the game kind of plays itself. So you don't even have to think that much and still do well. But let me know what augments you kind of like. And then we also have the BunnyMuffins tip of the day as we're going to do at the end of every single video. And the tip today is going to be an augment related tip. If you ever get Janna, if you ever wonder what the weather is and you're picking your augment, what you can do is click on the team planner and then select Janna and then check the weather there. So you could see what type of effect she has, even though the augment selection doesn't allow you to actually check the weather. So hopefully that tip helps you all. I felt like it was one of the few augment related tips that kind of like some people didn't really know about, but that's gonna be it for me. Hope you all enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you all next time.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to share and subscribe, and of course smash that like button. Each like is an LP I gain before the next video.